All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from all the way over in Europe, just outside Zurich in Switzerland, by Thomas Gelmi. How are you doing, Thomas?
Hello, John. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great, and I'm sending greetings from rainy and stormy and windy Switzerland.
Yeah. This is the time of year when San Diego really comes into its own. So for two decades now, Thomas, you've been supporting leaders and their teams at different levels in various industries as a professional executive coach, facilitator, sparring partner in four languages, which is very, very impressive. You have a lot of exciting milestones in your biography, such as 7 years as maitre de cabine at the former Swiss Air, or 8 years spent as operations director at an international consulting firm, and you also have helped train specialist. You're trained specialist providing psychological assistance to victims in crises, accidents, and other extreme situations. So
Mhm.
obviously, it gives you a lot of great insight into the human and human psyche. And we're going to talk about today the uncommon sense of human aspects in leadership, teamwork, and customer relations. So we often hear about common sense,
Yeah.
Thomas, and the big problem about common sense is it's not that common, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what uncommon sense is.
Well, you see, in my work, I focus on all the human aspects
Mhm.
in interaction, wherever people want to achieve something together, wherever influencing is a part of this collaboration or interaction, such in leadership, in teamwork, in customer relationships, like sales or customer service. In all these situations, these human aspects are often the game changer.
Mhm.
This includes emotional intelligence, it includes communication skills, and it includes also things like listening to someone when they are trying to tell you something, which, like many other things I stand for in my work, can be considered common sense. Of course,
Mhm.
you should be listening when somebody's trying to tell you something. Now, this sounds nice in theory. In practical everyday life, when we look into organizations and observe people how they interact with each other, it's often not so common, this
Mhm.
common.
Yeah.
If you just, in your next meeting with customers or colleagues or in a project meeting, whatever it may be, just observe, for example, how people are listening. And you will notice whether someone is really listening to understand or
Mhm.
whether they are pretending to be listening while what in fact they are really doing is waiting until it's finally their turn again so they can answer or be right or win.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not so common.
Yeah, no, and it's not, and I think what you just talked about there, listening. I think it's becoming a lost art almost because, as you said, for real active listening, like really listening to you, understanding what you're trying to say, thinking about it, and asking you intelligent follow up questions. Showing that I actually understood what you're saying. Because let's face it, Thomas, at the end of the day, people want to be seen, heard, and understood, and
Yes.
unfortunately we have these narcissistic things and other things
Yeah.
that we're allowing to distract us. So you're right. I think real active listening, we it's a dying art in many ways.
Yeah. And you just beautifully brought in the whole aspect of digitalization, right? These little helpers are intended to be helpers. And we have ways and means of exchanging information and communicating today. It's crazy, right?
Hmm.
However, and that's another paradox, if you wish, the more channels and means for communication we have, the more we just exchange information, exchange data, and the real human dialogue falls by the wayside.
Hmm.
And dialogue is, communication that goes deep. that includes hearing what you're not saying, right?
Right.
What's not being said, and looking for common solutions together. That's a dialogue. So yeah, it's become more and more difficult and challenging. And you also just said people want to be seen, heard, and understood,
Hmm.
which I call the emotional balance sheet.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's like in your bank account, right? It's either in the positive or it's in the minus. Same with emotions. And every relationship we have and every situation, like our interview, for example, here
Hmm.
today, has an emotional value, has an emotional balance sheet. Now, if this is predominantly positive, because I feel seen, heard, and understood, I will behave differently
Yeah.
towards you. I will also be willing to listen, to understand you. And so this is the principle of reciprocity, right? I'm
Mhm.
going to give back what you're offering me. Now, if this emotional balance sheet is in the red zone, in the minus, then you will see different behaviors. You will
Yeah.
see mistrust, pushback, not so sure if I want to buy this from you. Just
Yeah.
not what we usually want to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, absolutely, and I love what you said there about the idea. I just wrote it down here of uh, hearing what is not said. I mean,
yeah,
because that is so incredibly difficult to do if you're not actively listening, if you're not 100% focused, if you're not in the moment. And I think if you're not present, you're never going to get to that. And
yes,
often, the greatest things are in what's not said.
absolutely. And there you just said presence
Hmm.
and being focused and being mindful, right? Of course, this this adds value to the emotional balance sheet if I'm
Hmm.
really present and I'm listen actively. Now, active listening is often um, positioned as a method or as a technique,
Hmm.
when in fact it's more of a mindset
Yeah.
or an attitude, right? Really wanting to understand what the other person is saying, but also showing that I'm listening.
Hmm.
And this I naturally do when I'm focused. The opposite of that would be I'm with my eyes glued on a screen while you're trying to tell me something, and I'm going like, okay, yeah, yeah, what is it about?
Yeah.
Yeah, John, go ahead. Of course, I'm listening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is so disrespectful, and of course, you cannot. You don't catch everything, right?
Mhm.
That's being said. Not even mentioning what's not being said, right?
Yeah, so in your point there, Thomas, is again, it's about being intentional, right? And it's about
Yes.
understanding and paying attention to what you are doing. Because yeah, how often have we seen that today, where it's become acceptable for people? You stand in front of you having a conversation, and then this thing buzzes, and I immediately go down, look to check, and then come back to the conversation without a thought for how disrespectful that is to you. I mean, I guarantee you it's happening to all of us, and probably a lot of people are doing it too. So just watch
Yeah,
out
yeah,
for that.
yeah,
But
and
but if you pay attention to these things, because you are going to stand out today if
yeah.
you pay attention to these things.
Yes, you can already be refreshingly different if you just leave your phone in your pocket or in the car, even when you go for a business lunch. Refreshingly different. And that may be a differentiator that really makes a difference, especially, in sales, for example, customer relationships. Because you see, even having the phone on the table with the screen down, facing
Mhm.
down, it's still a signal. It says something, and it says that anything and everything that may come in on this device is potentially more important than my conversation with you.
Yeah.
That's the message you're sending, right? And you just said it, unintentional, right? Or
Mhm.
we need to be more intentional, because so many of us are just in autopilot mode, right?
Yeah.
We are not even aware of what we're doing. These people, when you come down the escalator and there's a bunch of people on the escalator, and then they arrive at the end and they just stop, they stand there and look at the map. Where do we go next? and you know, totally unaware of what's happening. So in being intentional is a key, and that
Yeah.
has direct link to being focused and mindful and present.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about autopilot because yeah, I think a lot of people were going through are going through life on autopilot. And let's face it, a lot of work is done virtually now. So virtual communications and virtual meetings, and sometimes people think that well that's okay. We're on a virtual meeting. I'm talking to Thomas. We're having a good conversation, but oh, hang on, there's something over here. Just give me
Mhm.
let's look at it. Now I'm back to the conversation. Now, oh no, there's something over here, and people think it has become almost acceptable to pop in, pop it out of focus or out of the
Yeah, yeah,
conversation. And
yeah.
again, and it's and I think people are doing it unconsciously. You said
Yeah,
autopilot.
yeah. Because if nobody says anything about it, if nobody points it out, over time and actually quite quickly, it becomes an option. And then it becomes the new normal,
Yeah.
right? We and a US psychologist once coined a term a few years ago. We live in times of continuous partial attention.
Mm,
Mm,
that's
that's one.
that's
That's a term. Continuous partial attention, and it really nails it. That's it. That's exactly
yeah.
it. Nobody is 100% present. Only me and you and our conversation anymore. And it's no bad intention. Look, it's just because it's
Yeah.
all there. We're sitting at our desktop, at our screens anyway, and then there's pop-ups and the thing
Mm,
vibrates and beeps because I can.
yeah.
But just because we can doesn't mean we should. We should,
Yeah.
right?
So how when you work with people, companies, how do you start them? How do you get them to start to look at these things and pay attention to the fact that they may not be paying attention?
Mhm. Well, by raising awareness, first of all,
Mhm.
it's a basic principle. Whenever you want to change something, the first the first thing needs to be awareness, because only what I'm aware of, or what you're aware of, or what I make you become aware of, we can start changing. We can start doing something about. As long as we're not aware of it, it usually
Mm.
has an influence on us, right?
Mhm.
So awareness, like a conversation, like we're just having,
Yeah.
talking about it,
Uh,
pointing it out,
yeah.
asking people to pay attention about what's happening in calls.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, and we're never going to change behavior, as you said, without acknowledging that there is something to change. I mean, I think it should be reasonable going forward if you're doing a call with somebody or they calling you, and you see them start to drift off. It should be
Yeah,
perfectly reasonable to say, "Listen, Thomas, is this still a good time for us to have this conversation? Because you
yeah,
seem a little distracted." I think if
yeah,
more people did that, more people would, get a bit of a
yeah.
shock and become a little more aware.
And you can say that in a very kind way.
Yeah.
That's key, because keep the balance sheet in mind. You
Mhm.
don't want to trigger a negative emotional response or an irritation on the other side, right? Sometimes I just stop talking when I see someone's typing or
Right.
someone's on the screen. I just stop talking,
Mhm.
not in a provocative way, but just out of respect. And then sometimes people would ask, what's up? Well, I'm just waiting until you're done,
Yeah.
and I really mean it,
Mhm.
right? I want to be mindful and respectful of your time and your tasks. And usually, people quickly understand. Oh, maybe it's not a good time to do multitasking.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point you just said is like people should understand that when you're having a conversation with somebody, an intentional, proper conversation, you cannot multitask, right? It is impossible.
Even outside of a conversation, you cannot multitask. It's a myth.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a myth. NASA did some studies there where they found out that it's we it takes longer for each individual task, and the productivity drops by, I think, up to 40%, because what we're really doing when we think we're multitasking is jumping back and forth between tasks,
Yeah.
and it's just
Yeah, I always call it just doing a lot of things really badly at once.
Yeah, we work better and actually more efficiently when we work in sequence rather than in parallel,
Yeah,
right?
and that's why sometimes people, it just an interesting one is, when somebody says, "Hey, Thomas, have you got a minute? I just need a quick answer," and you, being a nice guy, go, "Yeah, okay," and you give the answer, whatever. That minute actually costs you 20 minutes because
Yeah,
they've done studies that it takes you that long to refocus or whatever on what you're doing, or you can get more distracted after that.
exactly. And then there we are in the whole domain of self-management and
Mhm.
self-leadership,
Yeah,
because that's crucial. It's
yeah,
absolutely crucial to be present in what you're doing and intentional and aware of the impact you're having on others.
yeah.
Look at sales, for example, sales conversations. The emotional balance sheet is not only on the customer side, it's also
Yeah.
on the salesperson side. And we all have this innate need to feel good, to have a good sense of self-esteem, right? Etc.
Mhm.
And what do salespeople do? Let's say an average, maybe not so experienced salesperson. What does the person do to feel good, confident, and strong in a sales conversation? Very often, they talk a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And show their experience and competence and look how good we are and how nice and great we are and our products and blah blah. No bad intention. Again, it's very human
Yeah.
because we want to feel good. We want to be in a good emotional state. Problem with that is who needs to really feel good in such a conversation is the customer or the
Yeah.
potential customer. And very often, to make the other person be in a good emotional state where they are seen, heard, and understood may require some behaviors on our side that we would not instinctively show to feel good,
Right.
like holding back,
Mhm.
like not having to show what I know and everything I know because it's just counterproductive at the moment.
Mhm.
Listening is the thing that is required here and now, and let the customer talk. Right?
Yeah. And what you just said there is that great situational awareness, right? There
Yeah,
is a time, as you said, there's a time when you say you want to know that your salesperson is got lots of experience and they're great and all that. You want to have trust and faith in them. So there's a time for them to demonstrate that. There's also a time, as you said, for them to be humble, to stay quiet, to ask good questions, to listen, to give you the space to think. There's another one, Thomas. We hate silence. What is up with that? I ask you a very deep and great, fantastic question,
yeah,
right? And then
mm,
and then you go quiet and I
yeah.
jump in because, oh, there's silence, but I haven't given you an opportunity to think and
Very
then
common. Very common mistake. Salespeople do, leaders do, um, because you see, the thing with silence is that when you sit with your best friend somewhere out on a park bench with a beer in hand, you can go quiet for 15 minutes and it's not a problem, right? No awkward moment
uh,
because there's trust, there's a solid foundation of trust and relationship there, right? Now, if you have a conversation with someone you meet for the first time, maybe there's even a bit of pressure in the system because you need to close a deal or whatever it may be, then silence can quickly become awkward and we perceive it as the lack of something.
mhm,
And then we tend to fill the gap
yeah,
because there mustn't be a gap,
yeah,
right? And then people either do what you just described, or they do all these awkward noises like between every sentence, and then or right, or yeah, all these filler words that do not add any value to what you're saying whatsoever, but they fill the little gaps. Now, the thing with silence is also that it improves the quality of any conversation. And it is not the lack of something, it is a thing that you can intentionally add to conversation. So if you
mhm,
look at silence as an element, not the lack of something, but a thing, an element that you can intentionally add. For example, after an important statement you make, you just go silent for a moment
Right.
and you just let it sit there because it expands in the room and it gets more important and more weight, right? Or after the person you're talking to has answered your question and you just nod and
Mhm.
wait a moment and then you say something about it, or then you ask your next question, because what you're communicating with that is, I have been listening to you to the very, very last word, and
Mm.
I've not been preparing my answer already. I was there, and I even think for a moment what you just said. Okay, and then this is massively improves the
Yeah.
perceived quality of a conversation. And what you just beautifully described is this urge of filling the gap. And I mean, if you asked a question and the other person goes silent, it probably means this was a great question. And that question made them think, go inside and think about what you just said. And the worst thing you can do, because you cannot stand the silence and just be quiet, is to jump in and repeat the question in different words or add another question on top, also very popular, and interrupt the thought process that you have just
Mm.
simulated. This is like shooting in your own foot.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, that you've worked so hard to get there.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. If somebody didn't understand the question, they will ask, they will usually ask, John, what do you mean by
Yeah.
this question? Can you rephrase that? I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No,
they will
absolutely.
go silent.
Yeah, yeah, nobody's gonna sit there and go, "I didn't understand the question, therefore I'm just gonna sit here," right?
And
If
wait
you're
until
being
I
in silence,
understand.
it means that you're actually thinking about the question. Listen,
Yes.
listen, Thomas, this has been absolutely fascinating, such great
Yeah.
insights. All of Thomas's information will be below this video, but before we go, please do tell people a little bit more about you and what you do.
Well, I support people in leading positions in organizations in developing all these aspects that we just a little bit touched upon, right? All these human side, human aspects that are often considered common sense and that are often underestimated because they're considered common sense and therefore not developed systematically enough. That's what I do. And to apply leadership or demonstrate leadership, you don't have to be in a leading position,
Mhm.
right? Anybody can be a leader and show leadership. That's what I do.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, I would encourage you to go check it out. You've heard from today some great insights that Thomas has. So thank you again, Thomas. Thank you for watching and listening. I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.